have other folks joining us as we go through here. Excuse me about that. So welcome everyone to today's call, or maybe I should say today's conversation for the Let's Get Technical group. So we prepared some stuff for today, and I'll just go through, maybe I'll go through if this is going to advance. Everybody can hopefully see my screen. It's not cooperating. Oh, there it is. Okay. What we'll do kind of in general is just do a little bit of housekeeping, welcome and brief introductions. I want to update folks on some changes we made to the NIC site based on last week's suggestions and some other conversations. So as I've mentioned in the past, it's been a work in progress and will continue to be until we get it just right. And then we'll spend the bulk of the time today on our person matching project. And there was some work that went on since the last time we spoke, and there's been a project team working on this. Spent some time yesterday and then last week as well. And so Pradeep and Dave and some other folks, Marcely and others who will announce themselves will also talk about what's been discussed based on the initial work that was happening, kind of a strategy focus, and then review the updated spreadsheets, which are pretty cool. And then we'll spend some time talking about sort of what's next and how do we move this forward in a pragmatic and valuable way. And then we'll finish up the conversation here with discussion on potentially some other project teams. As I mentioned in the past, this is the person matching is the first project team that we have had, and it's a good model for getting started. But it might be time to start thinking about some other ones that would be of interest and value for other members of the Let's Get Technical to join. And then if there's any other next steps or meeting agenda pieces. So one of the things as we get started here is I would love it if everybody on the call here speaks at least once on the call, add your thoughts or comments, and so we get so we get the full value of the brain trust that is assembled here for this meeting and for this call. There's such terrific participation and different perspectives here, so really want to encourage people to join in the conversation as that happens. And then what I'd like to do now is just spend a couple minutes, since there's like 17 people, I think 18 are on the call here. Let's just go down and everybody say hello. If you haven't even if you have introduced yourself before, just say hello, kind of where you're from again. Remind everybody. We just take a minute to do that, so we kind of put a name and a voice together. And if you are so daring to join the rest of us on video and show us your sparkling face, that would be terrific as well. It's always good to put a voice and a name together, so don't be shy. There you go, with grandchild, I presume, Marcely. Hello. Yes, you can talk to. Excellent. Boy, we're getting, yeah, everybody gets extra bonus points for that. So let's start. I'm not sure at the top of the list here. I think, Eric, you're on my list. You're the first person up there. So just say hello, welcome, and a couple of words. That'd be great. And we'll just kind of run through this quick just to get connected to the folks here.
Sure thing. So hi, this is Eric in Memphis, Tennessee. I work with Driving the Dream, which is an initiative of the United Way of the Mid-South, working on networking social service providers together in order to break out of silos and sort of work together to serve our mutual clients.
That's great. That's great. And Eric, I think I mentioned to you, we were down there in Memphis with Dr. Robinson last year, about a year and a half ago or so, and I know Meredith. I don't know if you know Meredith, but she's a consultant there. So
very well.
Oh, great. Well, invite her along next time. I'll encourage her as well. Great. Who's up next? Just follow whoever shows up next on the screen on the right. Just a quick hello.
That might be me. This is Christine McCoy. I'm in Freehold, New Jersey. I'm with the Visiting Nurse Association of Central Jersey's Community Children and Family Health Institute, which is a community health agency with about 20 different programs funded through Health, Human Services, our Department of Children and Families here in New Jersey, that has been working on putting together a technology platform to unsilo our 17 different databases, as well as add in other community agencies to allow communication and a more holistic approach to the services that we're providing.
Fantastic. Great. Welcome back. Who's up next? Whoever. 705 or 703.
So I'll go ahead and start, Daniel. My name's Dave. My name's Dave Walsh. I'm a co-chair of the Let's Get Technical group. I've also been involved in healthcare, specifically Medicaid and a little bit of Medicare as well. My goal is to try and take the investments and the progress that's being made in healthcare and apply that to the human services sector as well.
Thanks, Dave.
Sure.
Paul, say hello.
Hi, this is Paul Wormley. I'm on the board of directors of Stewards of Change and the executive director emeritus of the IGES Institute. Happy to be here with you.
Great. Let's keep going here. Who's up next? Don't be shy.
Daniel, this is difficult. Why don't you just call a name and we'll introduce ourselves?
Okay. Thank you, Noam. So that everybody can see it. So that's Noam.
Hi. Noam Arts with HLN Consulting. I spend most of my time in public health.
Great. Carmen.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Carmen Smiley, IT Specialist, Office of Technology at ONC.
Oh, great. Hey, welcome. Somebody from 702-544. I don't know.
Would be me, Rita Turk today. I'm in Bethesda, Maryland, and I've been in health IT for many years, focused on interoperability and standards and implementation and consulting, and most recently for the last 2 years, I'm very focused on patient matching.
Oh, great. Thanks. Great. Fantastic. June Allen. June. No, June. Maybe stepped away. Christine, you said hello. Pradeep.
Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. This is Pradeep Padilla. I'm a public health informatics fellow with the CDC, and I'm working on a project related to cross-sector data linkages.
That's great. Thanks. Hey, Suzanne.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Suzanne Tamang. I'm at the Sanford Center for Population Health Sciences, and I also work with mental health operations at the VA.
That's great. Brian.
This is Brian Hanspicker. I'm the Neem Health Technical Lead.
Super. Thank you. Elliot.
Sandra Elliott. I'm with the EP3 Foundation and GG4L, so I'm the K-12 person, and I'm focused on getting our silos connected to the other social determinants so that we can meet the kids' needs a little faster and they move into workforce and college and career a little quicker and more prepared.
Super. Eric, are you on with us still?
Eric Yan, yes. I'm a CTO with HSLink, which is it's like link with a Y instead of an I, which is a human services platform as a service, and our APIs are at api.hslink.com, and we're just trying to build in as many domains as possible into a coordinated entry and matching general purpose platform as possible.
Thank you. Great. Glad you can join us here. Let's see. We have ICE. Is that?
Yep. This is Sean Yoshikawa, ICE
Hey, Sean.
Cybersecurity in San Diego, California.
Hey, great. Welcome. Yes, there are multiple Erics. Eric Byrne, Eric. Who else we got here that I haven't spoken to yet? Who hasn't spoken yet? Pradeep. I think that's Greg. Greg, you're on, right?
You can hear me?
Yeah.
Right on. I'm
Okay.
Greg. I lead the Open Referral Initiative. Open Referral developed the Human Service Data Specification, which is now standard for exchanging directory information about health, human, and social services. So mostly I work in a different domain, although pretty much, most of the members of our network are now dealing with client information exchange challenges. And so I'm increasingly involved in those conversations as well.
Okay, great, great. And I just think a couple other folks, Nava Stein is on. She's doing notes for us. Hello, Nava, welcome.
Hello, hello. My name's Nava. I work for Stewards, and I'm taking notes.
That's super. On Sundays, I think, as well, is our fabulous social media online community organizer who's on helping us do all this work. Welcome, Sundays. Anybody else joined that I hasn't had a chance to say hello?
Hi, I'm Adam Pertman, and I work with Daniel.
Okay, you work with Stewards as well. Great, fantastic.
Did we hear from Marcelly?
I
yes, yes, you saw my granddaughter, so you always
doesn't count. Nice
Alias.
I'm a distinguished visiting scholar at Stanford, and with EP3 Foundation, focused on how do we use technology to improve the lives of people, improving their health, wellness, and economic opportunities.
Fantastic. Thanks, Marcelly. Okay, so briefly what I wanted to do is, next slide here, is just briefly mention the National Interoperability Collaborative. I think most of you have seen this in the past. We'll post this online as well. But we're here under a grant from the Kresge Foundation to bring the communities together from across the country and to do stuff like these kind of these groups, building out the NIC, bringing people together, publishing, and trying to facilitate cross-domain work across the country. And recently was at the Medicaid Enterprise Services Conference, trying to bridge our efforts with Medicaid. Uh-oh. All right, somebody just put us on mute.
Daniel, I've always wanted to hear you against background music.
And I'm muting everybody. I'm just going to mute everybody here.
It looks like June Allen.
Oh, is that June? Okay, thanks.
I just by the readout, so if you can just June.
You're right, good. That's the nice part about Zoom there. So she must be getting lunch. Anyway, we were at the Medicaid Enterprise Services Conference a couple weeks ago and had the opportunity with Dave to continue to cross that domain with Medicaid, and had a little opportunity to hold our gallery, which this is one of the murals from there. The effort that we're doing across the country is to try to do this cross-domain effort to try to improve and increase cross-domain data sharing and information sharing, which I know all of you who are on the phone have interest in, and appreciate your support and involvement. For those of you who may be new to it, and I'm sure you've been to the site, but if you haven't, please go and you'll find lots of information about what we're up to, and happy to describe it to you. The one thing I'll mention is this idea of 6 domains. So we've been focusing on multiple domains. We know that there are more domains, and these are there are subsets of these domains, but an important consideration for this cross-domain work that we at least identify which domains we're really looking at. One thing, so just a couple minutes before we just dive into the substantive work on the person matching here, is wanted to spend a second for those of you online for the Collaboration Hub. We've made a couple of changes. Sundays has made a couple of changes for us. So when you go into the group and you go to the Let's Get Technical group, what you'll see at the very top now is some discussion or some direction about resources. We have the platform we're working on is very flexible, and as a result of that, it can be a little confusing. So what we did is sort of provide a little roadmap here for where things could go. There's a bucket here for resources, so that's any document, publication, research that is easily accessible, and you can be putting in your documents on that. We are building a repository which should be available in a couple weeks, and Sundays is working hard on that to try to make it searchable and specific to our work here. There's a forum, which is up here, which has that content for most of the discussions that are happening. I think that should be the place where discussions are happening. And there's been a number of substantive conversations going on in the forum and a back and forth. And now this is designed to be threaded, so back and forth conversations. Not necessarily in real time, but there's some really good content there. There are events, things that are coming up, or if you know of things that you want to add that can go in there, it's very easy to set up an event, add the details to it. There's a blog section. There's articles, which may be slightly different than a forum, but it's actually a specific article or a report that can go up there. And then there's photos or videos if there's anything that fits that criteria. So just use this as a bit of a guide as you go through, and hopefully that will simplify or clarify where to put stuff when you're doing it. My guess is that most of the conversation will be happening in the forum, where people can be reading it and responding to the conversations that are happening there. We're posting the slides and the recordings from each of the prior calls under this past call, so you'll find all the notes, the recorded materials. And then on the right side here, we have our strategy document, kind of what we're about, some of the featured discussions that are segmented by data sharing or some of these kinds of things, some of these kind of labels. And then the feature project. Right now, we just have this particular project on here. What you'll note, perhaps worthwhile or not, is actually project. This is the super menu for all of NIC, which is the bigger menu. Let's Get Technical has its other menu here. Projects right now lives in the big menu. So as we add projects, you'll see it up there. You won't see it directly here, but Sundays has added a link to it right there. And then we have the latest current kinds of things. There's the latest discussions. You can view all here. One thing that you'll just note if you're wondering how you add a conversation, there's an update happening now to the site where we'll have a little button here that will look very much like this one. Sorry, last point here, where it says add a discussion. Right, so all you would do is add a discussion, and then here are all the discussions that are happening and with the replies against many of them. Right now, you can't add a discussion from the home page. It's just not able to do that yet, but I suspect in a week or so we'll be able to just add them right from the home page here, so it'll be a direct access. And these submenus just oriented towards just sort of segmented the conversation, so to narrow it down a little bit. As you travel down the page, there's videos, there's more graphics that have come up from the last murals. And then this last section here, well, there's a blog section here, and the last section is sort of meant to be just sort of a general question or a comment. It's not really meant to be a discussion topic here. So if something specific comes up that you want people to know about, put it there. We'll see if that's of relevance. So we're trying to be responsive to the feedback we're getting. Hopefully it'll be, we'll continue to improve this as we go forward. And if there's any other ideas or questions, feel free, if you have a moment now, if there's anything that jumps to the top of your mind right now, please feel free to shout it out. If there's anything that's working or not working for you, you'd like to see differently. And then, of course, ongoing, we'll hear that as well.
Yeah, Daniel, I have just a quick question to make sure that I'm using this right. So the ability to post resources is associated with the group, not the project, right?
Correct.
Okay, so if I have matching resources, I've got to put them in the group, and I guess I'll preface them in some way with the word matching. Maybe it'll jump out at people.
Yeah,
okay,
right now.
I was looking within the project, and that's where I didn't see. I didn't see a place. So okay.
Yeah. So right now, there's two ways to add resources. One is just in the dialog box, and the other one is a little hard-coded. So we would add those. Sundays would add those. This is going to be replaced by the repository. So this will be a searchable repository. It will be more something, more of a common kind of repository where stuff can go. But to your point right now, in the project, since we only have one project, what you'll see here is people are adding, people are adding resources within the context of the discussion. So there's a bunch of different things that have been added here. But we'll want to organize those in the repository so they're available. I think it's hard to find in the discussion forum. But for right now,
but even in the group, only you guys can add resources on that resources tab. Is that what I'm understanding?
No, I think within. So I'm sorry to. Let me go back here and show it. You can add them, but they end up sort of like in the discussion, right? So the resources, it might be a good place so we don't lose them here, is...
no, I don't mean in the project. I mean in the group.
Yeah.
In the resources tab in the group. Not there. In the let's get technical group, the higher level group, you would... Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the higher level. Right.
The higher level, there's a resources tab, but only you can post there, right? We can't, or...
Actually, you both can, right? So this is a place where we would post them, but you can share your documents down here in the Share Your Documents, Reports, and Publications. You can do a link or whatever. So you can add them there. You can add them there. This is probably a cleaner place right now for documents.
And how will those appear? They'll just appear as a stream of messages below that?
Right.
Okay, and if we do that, can you commit to move them into the repository if that's, if when that comes to be, or should I just wait? That, I guess, is what I'm trying to establish.
I can add that onto my to-do list if we want.
Okay.
To track it each week and add the comments into the larger resource section so they don't get lost in the clutter. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Noam, if you've got time, or others, if you have time, maybe it's good to put them in there, and then Nava will transfer them, and then they'll be in the repository, so they could add up. So either way, if you've got time to add them now, we'll make sure we track them.
Okay.
And we'll grab the ones from the group itself. Okay. Thanks for that. Any other comments, questions, suggestions? Okay, great. Let me go back to the PowerPoint, and then we'll turn it over here if I can get this up here. There you go. Okay, so as you saw there's a lot of discussions going on in the project itself. Take a look at those. They're pretty substantive. But now that I want to just turn our attention to the project team and the notes, there were a number of people who met just the other day to kind of think it through a bit more. And here's the place where we want to have a conversation around what the latest thinking is around this person matching. And so with that, let me turn it over to Pradeep to kick us off, and Dave, and then everyone else. And let's think about this as kind of a roundtable conversation about where we want to go, what we've done, what we want to go and do next.
Thank you, Daniel. So yesterday, the project team met for an hour to review some of the work that we have been doing with regards to the feedback that was received for the template that was shared, that we have been using in the Word document. So a few questions came up on the call. So since we have met, we just wanted to have this like a roundtable so that we can share our information that we have discussed on the call. So the first thing is, so what exactly is the intent of this document? So what do you think is the intent of this document? So anyone from the project team, would you like to take it? Would you like to share your thoughts? How do you think? How do you think this document would be helpful?
By the document, you mean the Excel spreadsheet?
Right. Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I missed a call or two somewhere in there, so I've looked at it. I'm not quite sure because, you know, we went from a sort of very empty spreadsheet outline into something that, when I just sort of looked at it briefly, was sort of packed with the information. So I need to unpack some of that information before I understand what you know, where it might be going. There's a huge amount of information in there now. So it went from 0 to, you know, to 100 in, you know, in a couple of days.
Okay, sure. Thank you. So I mean, how do you think the document can help us in moving forward? I mean, what are some of the things that are of interest, to you, and how do you think this document might be helpful or might be tweaked?
I think the document is extremely helpful for the people across the country at the county and state and city local level that are putting together the RFPs to do the types of, to care for the people in their community the way they want, the way policies allow, and in a way that is possible with cloud technology. And the reason I say it, I think there are brilliant, hardworking people across the country in a silo trying to figure out what to put in an RFP and what's possible. And I saw this in my own county, Santa Clara County, in the behavioral health. I'm on the behavioral health board. And if the RFPs don't reflect what's possible and don't build in a set of expectations that are optimal, then the results they fall short consistently. And one of the things I've learned from the San Diego project, which I think is a really great model, is that the contracts aligned with what's possible and the expectations were aspirational, but they were also possible. So when you look at a document that is packed with information, there are a lot of smart people that have some backgrounds in some areas, but they might not in the others that are critical for the goals that they want. So I see the document that you've gathered as a informational way to identify the areas that might shut down success, and then being able to minimize and problem solve in advance and put that together in an RFP and make it easier for industry to meet expectations.
Thank you, Marshall. Any other comments? Any other thoughts?
Well, one thought I had is, in just response to Daniel, in response to Marcelli, is when you say I'm assuming you're saying, you know, county and maybe city, county, state, federal government, to incorporate that into RFPs or cooperative agreements. I'm assuming, or I want to clarify that, what I'm assuming is that they'll be able to articulate in this particular niche here that the ability to match identities or match people in different domains, that attention needs to be brought to that, and that also they need to address that issue in particular. So that's why I want to just make sure that we clarify that.
Yes, exactly. So in my county, they had contracts that were to do cross-domain. They had one large contractor for health and the other for mental health services and substance use services. The contract required that they worked interoperably. So they required them to. They committed to it. They paid for it to be done. But the contract did not require that the quality of that interoperable data was high enough for the director to feel confident that she could sign the invoices to be reimbursed for Medi-Cal. Meaning, technically it worked, but it didn't really work because it wasn't consistent or high enough quality. So they had to go back to manual. Now they start again with a new contract with a different, they have to do it differently. So if our own director, who is hardworking, brilliant, I admire her work, she's aspirational, she really wanted to have a system that allowed her to do background care and be able to track and manage electronically. And technically it did, but in reality it didn't because the quality wasn't high enough.
Boy, wouldn't it be nice if there was a white paper or an instruction manual that could be shared with all the agencies in the U.S. to say, guys, it can be done, and here's what you need to put in your RFPs, which will get the vendors moving to actually build these APIs and the linkages and stuff.
That's a great point. So would that be helpful to identify some of those publicly available RFPs, just to see what is the overlap of, I mean, what are the domains that we are taking into consideration, and what are the domains that they have been requesting within the RFPs, to see the overlap, to work towards that master requirement list?
Mm-hmm. That's a great idea. Let's see who's doing what.
Absolutely. Thank you. Because I think, I mean, the PicoreNet RFP for identity management is publicly available. Maybe that can be a good starting point. That is something that maybe I can take a first stab at it. And if anyone on the call has access to any other RFPs or something, I mean, something which could be shared, or at least based on your experience, if you can share some insights or some rough notes, that would be really great to start piecing this together. Like some kind of a guidance document related to RFPs.
Well, and I think what Greg just brought up on the chat, that there are exemplars where there's use cases where you absolutely should do this. And then can we uncover the use cases where this may actually cause a problem? Because depending on policies and procedures in certain parts of the country and agencies, I mean, it sounds almost like we're assuming that the U.S., the members people who are trying to do this in the various agencies don't know what they don't know. Don't know what they don't know. And we could be a means of educating people.
Exactly. That's a great point. Thank you, Greg.
Yeah. This is Carmen Smiley from ONC. I just want to definitely applaud what the direction that we're going in. I do want to point out the word depend. And so a lot of this will depend on what is available and the context in which they're operating. And so much of the paper sounds like we really just want to provide information to help people make informed decisions. And whether those informed decisions are responding to an RFP or making either technical or policy or other programmatic changes, but there will be so many things that depend. And so as long as we're mindful.
Thank you, Carmen. Thank you for the great points. Thank you.
Hello, Eric Jan here. I also wanted to point out, I think we really need to focus on gaps and what should be, as opposed, and I do very much see the necessity for RFP assistance guides or something that would help localities procure. However, I also think we have a function to point out what's should be there and what's not available, or what doesn't exist but which should exist. And that way, not only communities can use our RFPs to implement, they can also encourage vendors and providers to move in a direction that they may not want to otherwise. And this would help coalesce and accelerate that recognition of where we're lacking as far as feature sets with any of our projects.
Yeah, current state and opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Yep, please.
I was just going to ask a question. Are there examples, I'm thinking, Carmen, in particular, from your vantage point at ONC, that such, I use the word guidance, small g, are there examples of that? Or let's say this group decided that it was going to put together that white paper around this, like here are the considerations for cross-domain, person matching. Is that, are there, one, is there examples of that? And two, if there's not, do you have suggestions about how to make that better known, or identify the availability of that?
Of any resources, and so the first that comes to mind as far as a white paper goes would be, of course, the Sequoia Project paper on cross-organizational identity. It's a very important paper, was recently, I think, updated last year. But it does not provide every answer to every question because it's unable to, of course. But it provides, use cases and some suggestions and some research findings. There's also the more recent Pew paper on patient matching that's very informative. There are some resources that address specific aspects, like increasing data quality. And so there's something called the Patient Demographic Data Quality Framework that ONC put out that is really a governance framework overall, but helps systems, mid-sized to large, and work towards measuring, monitoring, and improving their data quality over time, because no matter how advanced the algorithms we try, if the data is terrible, it simply cannot overcome that challenge.
And that's a great point. I mean, thank you, Carmen. So the thing is, I think, as we think about the different domains that come within the RFP, we can start piecing together by mapping out them based on the conditions, like what are the technical constraints, what are the security constraints that we need to think about, in addition to governance, which Carmen just mentioned, and also some of the additional things like, okay, the ownership or licensing. So we can actually start putting them into different domains to make sure, are we covering everything that we should think about while putting up the RFP?
I guess one of the questions is,
I don't think we need to worry about getting everything in, because we already have many, many wonderful things in. I wanted to make sure we also talked about sharing contracts. We can redact financial components if needed, but being able to share the contracts of what the projects that were successful, or at least moving forward, it's very helpful to have access to those contracts. So the RFP plus a contract.
Okay, great, thank you. I thought Daniel had a point or a question.
Well, I was just gonna ask whether or not I think I just lost my thought. Hang on a second. I'm sorry. I don't recall what I was just going to say. Moving right along.
So as you're recalling that, Daniel, this is Dave Walsh. One of the things that I think we are zeroing in on is the fact that we're looking at cross-domain identity matching, and in order to achieve that, there needs to be a whole lot of people that are doing things the same or similarly to be able to get that interoperability in there across domains. One of the things that I would like to do a little bit more looking into is where any nationwide standards are being proposed and have the hope of success. So at least we educate ourselves on what's happening at a nationwide level. And maybe the lady from ONC is aware of some of those activities, but I think for us to look at those activities is going to help a great deal with our cross-domain initiatives.
This is Carmen from ONC. I'm deeply aware of many of these activities, and I'm happy to share resources with everyone.
That would be terrific. Thank you.
I just, this is Eric Young from Alexandria HS Link. Quick thought just came to mind is that, I was just on the Open Health Information Exchange conference call, and they were actually discussing, how do they pick which exact specifications from the healthcare standards, especially fire, for conformance to their chosen set of platform software. Okay, and I love that group because it's very, it's very grounded in the fact they're developing specific software. But one of the things as a human services person that I keep noticing about all these discussions is that, especially with patient identity matching, a lot of this is healthcare I guess, I don't know what the word is, dominated. However, a lot of the resources of, community organizations and the software that these community organizations use is a much, it's just not clinical, and it won't ever be. And the costs associated with that kind of certification regime and specification might be a little high for a lot of the tools that a lot of human services users need. And so we need to look at what's the bare minimum for interoperability, not, hey, let's just pin this to the current fire standard. Maybe fire is easier than the old standards, but I'm just, as far as a web protocol, but I'm just saying that not necessarily mapping to healthcare standards is the best approach if we're going to try to get an affordable, minimum viable specification for human services. And then obviously if additional features are needed for different purposes, obviously those in the community chooses to have those features or needs them, then we would also offer guidance or suggestions on those as well. Just a quick thought I had on that topic, sorry.
It's a good thought.
Hi, this is Rita Turk today. Can I just add something based on what a few of you have been mentioning around specifically like standards and what's been going on? One of the things that I'm trying to understand with this project, and I'm pretty new to this is my second call, is the way that this project, the genesis of it, was it focused on healthcare or human services or other domains, as you call them, other areas? And the reason I ask this because in the work that I did with Pew, and Carmen is probably familiar with this, one of the areas that they looked at specifically was around the standardization of demographic data, but it was very specific to using healthcare data sets, and so therefore health related data sources, but I don't know if it would apply to other types of sources that are non-health data. But in terms of what was found with that particular research that was done by the Regan Street Institute, John Granis from Indiana and his team, is that the standardization of certain data elements can help, specifically like address according to the USPS format, but not necessarily other types of standardizations, and for a variety of reasons. And so I can definitely, and I'm sure Carmen can as well, point you to that particular work. But I'm just curious as to whether similar types of analyses have been done with other types of data and other domains, or if there's even some kind of an evaluation similar to that, or if it's just if it's only being looked at from the healthcare standpoint based on recommendations that have been given by ONC and other types of entities that have recommended, for example, standardization.
This is Brian. In partial answer to your question, and I'm sure that others will have their own perspective on this, but I think one of the things that's unique about the patient matching, client matching work that we're attempting to do here within the NIC's Let's Get Technical group is that it is across healthcare and human services domains. We're trying to understand how, if a child welfare agency is working with a foster child, how do we ensure that the client demographic information for this specific individual matches the same specific individual within a clinical healthcare system, so that the Child and Family Services folks can retrieve healthcare records from a local healthcare provider, and vice versa, where a healthcare provider is noticing that there may be, for instance, signs of abuse, interact with the child protective services and know that they're talking about the same individual based on the client and patient matching information.
I think it even goes beyond that, Brian. This is Paul. I think that we're really trying to address all 6 of these domains. So if the use case gets extended to include education or justice or public health, or how do we match those records across the different domains? Since and I'm really kind of answering question, I guess, because my understanding is that whatever research has been within domains, not across domains. And I think the value added of what we're doing could be to deal with this issue of how do you reconcile the different approaches to patient matching and person matching between, for example, justice and human services and health.
I agree wholeheartedly, Paul. As you know from my work with New York State's Office of Children and Family Services, trying to build a federated system that collected every piece of electronic information associated with the child in the foster care system.
This is Christine McCoy. I just wanted to add that the CMS's Integrated Care for Kids cooperative agreements, once those are awarded next year, they explicitly require that there's collaboration between health, child protective services, education, and they suggest the justice sector as well. So that particular set of collaborative agreements is going to push this along, and it's going to be very challenging.
Would that be a good set of agreements to include in our resources so that everybody could see them? Because is it actually going to push electronic data exchanges, or is it going to be the same old thing that we've been doing in K-12, which is pick up a phone, send an email? It's like, that's not what the intent of these things were.
Well, if we can't solve it, it will be done the old-fashioned way. But I'm hoping that I know our New Jersey, application very much wanted to try to push the technological side, and I'm hoping the other states did as well.
I think that what's that ancient phrase? The heart is willing, but the mind hasn't figured out how to get the hand to do it yet.
Sneaker net still prevails too often.
Yes.
And this is Pradeep. Someone raised a point as to how do we exactly identify the same person to say that it is indeed the same individual on the other side of the domain. So this is too early, but I'm working on a project called Childhood Obesity Data Initiative, CODI. It is a CDC project funded by ASPE at the Health and Human Services. So trying to look at what are the interventions that are available in the community and to do some comparative effectiveness research of the interventions present in the community with regards to childhood obesity. So here we are looking at cross-sector domains. And thank you, Carmen, for being a part of the activity. I greatly appreciate your inputs. So trying to look at both the clinical and the community touch points of the kids to understand the different interventions related to weight management, nutrition, and physical activity. So, hopefully, in the next few calls, I'll be able to share additional details. But that is also we are trying to identify how do we say that it is indeed the same person we are talking about. So that's a use case, yeah. Thank you.
So it sounds to me, thank you for this, Daniel, bringing up the integrated care for kids. That was one of the more forward-looking RFPs coming out of ACF that we've seen in a long time. And then, Pradeep, what you just said in terms of the cross-domain piece, is making me think a bit more. I remember what I was going to say is about this cross-domain work, right? So, Dave, you articulated that. What I'm thinking about is there a group of both programs or agencies or individuals who are interested in these topics that could, in a sense, become the target of this work, right? So I could see, for instance, the integrated care for kids. I don't remember exactly how many grants they're going to award, but they were significant. I think there were
8.
Oh gosh, 8? Yeah,
yeah,
there were
it's 8.
8. So each of them is going to have to figure this out, right? Each of them will have to figure out how they're going to do cross-system identity or person matching. Wouldn't it be interesting, or would it be interesting to be able to say, look, we've done that work, right? Here's that, whether or not it's the white paper or a cross matrix, a matrix that cross tabs different programs. Here is the way to go forward on that, right? Or here are the questions that need to be answered, the outstanding pieces. They could then become almost partners in that or collaborators in that, along with other programs, if the resource was sufficiently researched and addressed those particular issues. So I'm thinking that as we go forward on this, picking a particular example or use case, like between human services and health, or between child welfare and health, and a person matching example, while there may be many of them, though that might be one may be a very good first use case that could explicitly demonstrate the value of that, so that as more and more cross-domain work happens, it becomes the sort of de facto way of thinking about what are the solutions, what are the most viable solutions, almost kind of crowdsourcing that, and what are those deficits, as Eric was saying before. What are the deficits there that don't address all the needs that we have?
So are you sort of describing how this could be seen as a resource, letting them know that we've got evidence of what has worked. We'd love to fill you in on that so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Maybe you can take the 2 steps forward and 1 step back and add on to what's already been done. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's one of the thoughts I've got here.
It makes perfect sense.
Right? Because everybody else is going to have to figure that out.
Well,
and
because we know that with everybody in silos, the states function in silos. There are some agencies that you guys represent that cut across, but even y'all can't let all 50 states and all the agencies within each know what's going on because there's just so much information. But starting at some key leverage points where people are indicating that they do want to do this makes a lot of sense.
So I think we're sort of certainly addressing some of the key issues here. I think one of the things that I've heard now is that this cross-domain, focus on the cross-domain is where the value proposition really lies. Is really the important the important differentiator here, because everybody's going to figure it out. There's solutions within a domain, but it's the cross-domain piece. Let me push it back to Pradeep and Dave and say, how did you guys, if you did, talk about that at all yesterday relative to addressing that particular issue? Is it to continue, and maybe it would be a good time to show or momentarily to show that spreadsheet, or did you have more thoughts about how to make it sort of concrete in a way, or more, moving towards the concrete?
It's like trying to identify. I'll take a first stab at it, and Dave and rest of the team members, please jump in. So one thing is something that struck with me yesterday on the call was one of the comments made by the team members. Is trying to see even within the cross domains, are we talking about 2 domains, or are we talking about more than 2 domains? So what exactly are we trying to look at? I mean, and what would the domains be? If at all it is cross domains, so what would that be? One might be healthcare, and if then, what is the second domain? What is the third domain? So because the complexity increases with the addition of additional domains, but that is something that stuck with me. Dave, anyone? Marshall, anyone?
This is where I think looking at cross-domain and including the education community provides the most robust resources around identity, so that patient matching and client matching is so much better, because the schools require, if you go to register a school, it's much different than if you just walk in a clinic, particularly if it's incarcerated. So I think by looking at the education community, and it's also where there's so much need and so much investment, because you've got the school to prison pipeline issue that can be addressed much better if you can provide a comprehensive approach to those families. And then there's also so many places with workforce services. Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I
all of
love
them.
I love the work going on in obesity. It's like that's almost 30% of our children in K-12. Career readiness. So yes, K-12, we just need somebody to help us figure out how we connect with everybody else. I think you all are a lot more advanced than we are. We still have problems getting data just up to the states about enrollment. We still sometimes do PDFs.
And when it comes to some of those topics that we talk about, for example, obesity, as we're talking about obesity, it's like, and also based on the context of the place and the dynamics of the place where this effort is being implemented, the kind of community organizations that need to be interacted will change. So that's another interesting dynamic to it. It's like there may not be commonalities as the place changes when we look at the clinical and community linkages.
I think the context changes, but what has to happen is the same across the board. You have to know what you have. You have to know why you have it, what the rules are around it, and then you have to have a roadmap for executing those roles or those rules. So we talk about it's more and more complex. Well, it just means it's a little bit, it's the same, but now you have to consider something else. It's when we haven't considered documenting and tracking how we got this information, under what circumstances, what devices, what location, then that's what it becomes gobbledygook and we can't move forward. By setting in a set of practices that tracks the provenance of the data, then it lifts us out of this quagmire.
Absolutely, great point. Thank you. Thank you.
So, Pradeep, do you want to put up, I know there's been, actually I'm very interested in Noam's comment about the sort of the current state of affairs there that he posted. It sounds like there's some sort of general guidance, but not specifics that we're contemplating here in terms of being able to really look at different domains and say, oh, I've got three red marbles and you've got 2 blue marbles. How do we know whether or not they're related? Or I'm not sure that metaphor works too well, but how do we know how, if there's a child in our system and there's a child, and is that same child showing up in whether or not it's a healthcare setting or social services setting? How do we pragmatically point people in that direction to say, here are the available tools. These things would need to be connected. There would need to be, Dave, fill in the blank here, APIs that would exchange or communicate between those 2 different approaches.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I would say, at least for me, on yesterday's call, we really did kind of nail down that the objective was to have a cross-domain approach to this. And with that, if that's our direction, then I think it's going to be really important for us to understand what's going on in that space. I see Carmen has already posted a link to the ONC, that Health IT Gov. So for us to kind of look at national efforts to go do this and determine which might be likely to succeed. So the first part is, in my opinion, educating ourselves on what is happening out there and trying to avoid reinventing the wheel, because then we'll become another silo if that's what we do.
So is a way to do that to pick 2? I think Marceli is sort of advocating for education. I know that there's other areas out there. Should we look at, while we're going through trying to fill in the matrix, should we also then look at trying to create simple, or at least a 2x2 or a 1x1? How does education interact with social services or with health services as a demonstration point?
One of the ideas that we had around this was to take a very small niche of youth, and then it's a very real one that's expensive and a tricky one. It's the ones who are already incarcerated, so they are behind bars. The Department of Education in that county is required to teach them, so there's Department of Ed. There's also justice because they're in jail. They have mental health services, and they have substance use treatment. So by looking at those youth and how do we continue to serve them after they leave, so how do we serve them while they're incarcerated and then as they leave, that makes a very relevant and tight use case.
I totally agree with that use case idea, and that particular one is an excellent one because it crosses the maximum number of domains I think you could consider. And the question to me then is, so how to, if you were building the way for each of those domains to communicate with the other domains, how would you answer this difficult question when you have different approaches to patient matching in the different domains, varying in their complexity and sophistication?
I think you take the spreadsheet that Pradeep created for us, and we look at what are the things we need to know about this one system, or this one judicial system where they have these youth incarcerated, and then we do the same thing for the human services that are going to support them, the same thing for the health services, and the same thing for education. And by using the spreadsheet that he's identified, we at least know to think of the things on that sheet, and that gets us so much further than we've ever been before.
So would it look like, we go through the spreadsheet continuing to add to that, but then would it also look like there would be kind of the first use case, which would identify, that incarcerated youth who's now been released, and the interaction between, the education, parole, or probation, and other areas, health, whatever, behavioral health, mental health. That would be the use case. We'd look for how to confirm identity, or how to confirm that individual in all three systems. What are the mechanisms now?
I think the first use case, the first is just to care for them in prison, which right now, education, mental health, substance use, and they already don't mix. They're using phone calls and they're talking to people and doing emails. So the first use case is the actual student in prison. Then the second use case is how do we help them, and how do we help the counties manage and coordinate their successful integration and education into workforce.
But is that a person matching problem that we're addressing, or is that a different problem you're suggesting?
Everything falls apart when you can't agree on the person.
Okay,
so
that's what I'm asking.
It's the foundation. It's the foundation of all of the issues. Is do we agree we have the right person and the right role to allow for something to happen?
So, Marcelie or Elliot, I guess one of the questions that I've got is in education, especially K-12, if that's our initial focal point, is there an underlying agreed upon IT infrastructure? I had the opportunity to go to that ITSE conference up in Philadelphia, and at least with the people that I talked to, there did not seem to be an awful lot of information that was being exchanged. It seemed more like one-off products all over. So is there an underlying data exchange infrastructure or initiative in K through 12?
We're working on it.
Very good.
Yeah, I wish Scott Gallant was on here because he probably has the most comprehensive view of what we're doing. But right now we're kind of like the domains that you are. So within a state, we're constantly exchanging data with the state exchange it with the feds because that's our money. It's a huge chunk of the money. You know, we're trying to find ways when I switch a student to another district that we agree it's the same one and do it electronically. The one thing we do have that seems to be helping is you do have a smaller subset of what are called student information systems that house what Marcelly's been talking about, basically our identity data. I know that this is John B.Q. Adams because it's got all the information about him. It's got the consent decree from the judge for this, that, and the other. And I can move that around and be fairly certain I'm still talking about the same student. The only thing we don't use usually is the social security number. So you've actually got some vendors and the state agencies who are getting towards that, but there's still an awful lot of paper. And in the smaller districts, it's not real good, but we can find a way to do it. That's what we're aiming towards is exactly this, but also this ability to exchange information around the kids that we're serving in the prison. And we're waiting to find out what's being done for their prescription. So does that answer your question?
It does. It's a work in progress.
Yes.
But I guess just listening to you, well, that was Elliot, right?
Yeah.
Speaking, yeah. I'm almost thinking that in many of the efforts, I was really impressed with what I was hearing in the introductions, and I wanted to stop each person and find out more about their initiative. So I'm just throwing out the question, maybe it makes sense for us to have an individual, Marcelly or Elliot or the combination, kind of give us a 10-minute, 15-minute overview of that industry, because there are many of these domains that I really don't understand what the IT infrastructure looks like. So it's just, it's a question, Daniel, of maybe we want to highlight different domains periodically and get a kind of state of the union from those domains.
This is Christine. I think that sounds like a great idea. I mean, just this week we've been trying to get an electronic health record to talk to one of those very common school information systems, Genesis, and it's been very, very challenging because a child is not considered to have an address. The child is the child, and then there are the parents listed, and there's the parents' address or addresses, depending on the family structure. They also have the addresses, even the fields for the addresses, the street and the zip code in town are all in one single field.
Ooh,
so it's very difficult. It's very difficult to work with from a data standpoint.
Well, and what we've done in K-12 because of that very problem, because I have a student information system, Genesis, you have one called Power School. Those two companies are competing for the money from each of us. They both want my contract as the K-12 district. So what's happened is we have an industry, there's not many of them, they're called integrators. They actually build the pipes and work on cleaning up the data and translating it. So I don't care if you've got Genesis, if you need the information and you've got a different system, the API's there. So there's actually a whole little industry that does nothing but that. And that may be the avenue to go, is work with the people who do the data integrations, because all they do is clean, translate, and transmit.
Yep.
Can we get one of them to come and talk to us about how they do that, or what the basis is for the resolution of this issue?
That would be easy. Larry, I work with a great technologist who knows a lot of other fields. And he talks very simply and very technically. So he would probably be more than willing to explain this. And I know that he's been interested in it. Marley, would you agree? Or could Orland do it?
Oh, Larry would be fantastic because he would be able to answer an actual data question. The advantage to looking at the handful of school integrators is they have access to the bulk of the schools across the country.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
That's so many hundreds of millions of families. And the education data, there are abilities, there are some services. iSafe Enterprises provides a service that helps to create a qualified and quantified parent-child match with their custodial role. So they have identity services. They would also be a great one to present. So it would give cross-domain organizations in a community more confidence they have the right person, so they can then provide the right services and meet the right requirements depending on those services.
Right, right.
So, you know, I'm again always impressed with the depth of knowledge in each of the domains. We're talking education, public health, healthcare, some criminal justice on the phone now, some social services. So we've got at least 5, if not all the domains actually represented here. And the question is, you know, on Coles, how do we organize that? We had an idea, and I think Noam has made a recommendation here that makes a lot of sense for individuals who are familiar with their particular domain is to, you know, sort of take, take the proverbial bull by the horns and actually put in some of that information, and then we can begin to sort that through. I think Pradeep, maybe if you want to show the spreadsheet on your side, or I can do it on mine. But
could you please make me the presenter, Daniel?
Oh, do I got to do that? Sure, you got it.
And thank you, Noam, for the for the message in the chat box. Yeah, that was the intent for creating those variables, and I appreciate that input. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, I think I sent you control my screen. I didn't send you the right one. Where's the control to?
I think you might have to click my name and then make me the presenter.
Maybe that's it. Make host. Yeah, I will try that. I'm going to make you the host. See if that works. Giving all the control there. Okay. It's all yours. Take us for a ride.
Thank you. I think it hasn't yet popped up on my end. Just waiting for it.
I think you're controlling my screen. Let me, for sake of time, I think I can just pull it up here. Oh, here it is. Okay. I think you can control my screen now. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. And thank you, everyone, for your feedback yesterday on the call. I appreciate it. So this is just a work in progress. This is an Excel book version of what Daniel has put together, and the initial one, which is like a one-pager Word document, was converted into this Excel workbook, so that this can be the tracker for us to keep track of many different things that we have been talking about. The first one is still, this is a work in progress, so things need to be added, just like a face sheet, then giving an idea about the team members, the members on the team, so that if someone needs to reach out to someone with some expertise or anything like that, we can do that. And then just a meeting tracker. Still, this is work in progress, but this is the key here, which is okay. So this is the document. The template that we started in the Word document has been upgraded here. As you can see here, we started adding different domains, different subdomains for the cross sector, as well as different criterion, which might apply to many of these domains. But if you find something missing, please feel free to add it and make any changes. We are not stuck to this format, but this is just somewhere to start. So it's mostly talking about what is the use case, what is the country of origin, because sometimes some of these regulations might change because of the country of origin. And what is the regulatory authority that we are dealing with here? Is it federal, local, state, or some licensing authority? The type of the organization, Is it government, public? Is it like a distributed data network? Types of agreements that are needed to facilitate such cross-domain linkages. And what is the type of cohort we are dealing with? Is it special populations like pediatric population, adults, elderly? And even within those domains, are we talking about some rare disease conditions? What exactly is it that is of our focus? And what is the participation type? Is it voluntary or not? The type of the matching algorithm that is being considered over here, is it like deterministic, probabilistic, rules-based, machine learning, or something that is hashed encrypted data sharing, PPRL, privacy preserving record linkage? Then comes the types of data elements that are considered here. Is it solely based on administrative elements, or is it looking at clinical? What exactly is it we are talking here? And then of those domains, what are the specifics of it? I mean, how is this information being shared? Is it like clear text data or some encrypted hash data? And the protocols for interoperability are also very important, followed by the data structures. The data structures for interoperability, and what is the sample size that is being used here as a part of this cross-sector linkages, followed by the metrics for the linkage. And another key one is, okay, what is the gold standard to say that we are able to make the right match? We are able to indeed identify the correct individual. So is it based on some real world data, or based on synthetic data that has been developed, or is it synthetic data that was developed by someone else that is being used? Followed by what are the key results and findings, limitations and the abilities related to the selection of it based on technical and environmental constraints. And also, I mean, the applicability of this use case for another domain. How can this be translated? Based on what are the commonalities and how can this be translated? So these are the different criterion that we came up with, and very well something might have been missed here. So at your convenience, if you could reflect upon this and share some thoughts, that would be greatly appreciated. So I'll just pause for a minute just to see the initial reflections.
This is the participatory part of the service.
Mm-hmm. I think this whole piece of work is tremendous, Pradeep. You've really done a masterful job of pulling it all together.
Thank you so much. I mean, it's a lot of fun. I'm enjoying working with the team. Thank you.
So, what would be your suggestion or other people's suggestion about how to sort of, not complete it, at least make progress? I mean, it would be cool to see, over a couple of weeks, if there were sort of subgroups on the human services, public health, education side that began to fill this in. So as we moved along, we're beginning to see the information that's showing up in a way that would be unique to each particular domain. And then the comparative part is still something I'm not quite sure how, if we do the comparison on here, or if there's another cross spreadsheet, like a crosswalk spreadsheet that we do the comparison on between different specific domains.
I think GNOME did sort of the initial work in terms of identifying resources and references for things that have worked. And maybe it would be useful if we started by identifying what resources are out there that talk about what's a primary identifier, what's a secondary identifier, what's a tertiary identifier, what's worked in the different domains, and maybe if people from each of the domains kind of added on to what GNOME had put on the site, and maybe all of that can then get collected into this document so that it's all in one place. Maybe that can then inform what happens next.
So that's a great point. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Would we want to add and this is the volunteer part of the call here. Would we want to add a name or two to each of those domains for people who are willing and able to start that process? And this is where the sort of the domain stewardship starts to come into play a bit. So under, whether or not it's public health or education, just to identify who it is that's doing it. I know people have busy schedules and a lot of stuff going on. But if we are, if we're able to identify that, that would certainly go a long way, I think. I don't know if it's another column or just adding it into the first column there.
I don't actually understand what this spreadsheet means, to be honest. I mean, maybe someone needs to fill in one row to give us an idea of what this means. I have no idea what these columns really mean and what the purpose of this is. Maybe it's just me.
No, that's a perfect.
Right.
I agree with you.
Yes, I think if we just build in that question, what is it and why does it matter for each of those? And if we had someone doing health put in why it's important or why it matters or not, and someone from education and someone from justice and human services.
But I just like to see, I just like to see one row filled in so I can even understand what the purpose of this is before everyone jumps in and starts to fill this in. I don't understand what it is. So maybe Pradeep, you could take the one row you're perhaps familiar with, fill it in so we have some idea of what you intended when sort of setting this up.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. I can definitely take a first stab at it. Yes.
Help me.
And another way to support that is at the bottom of the document, if you can do sort of a short version of a data dictionary where you describe what the value of the item is and what kind of format it's supposed to be in and things like that. That'll
sure, absolutely. Absolutely. That makes sense.
And is this posted on the forum at this point?
I don't think so. Yeah.
Could we get copies of it? And this is Brian Hansbecker. I appear to have fallen off of your email distribution list since I didn't know about yesterday's meeting. And last I checked, I was supposed to be on the team roster.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, absolutely. This will be posted and also emailed. Yeah.
So we're getting close to our time here. Pradeep, is there? Would you be working on the healthcare side of the?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. You can put my name next to that. Yes.
Sure. I'm just thinking if there's anybody. Sometimes it's easier to work together with someone on this. I don't know if there's anyone who would want to volunteer to sort of do this with Pradeep. I don't rush at once.
Daniel, I would like to work with Pradeep. This is Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay. Okay. That would be great. I think with your healthcare experience, that might be great to pull that out there. The one thing that I just saw here that might make sense is at the very end of the spreadsheet, I'm just thinking about whether or not we have, where would we have the type of matching, a person matching approach. Is that?
There is actually in the type of matching, there is a column called
type of matching algorithm.
Right. J, column J.
Okay, right.
So Pradeep, I can't quite see it right now, but is there some common approach to security when we're exchanging this data? Is that included in this yet?
I do not think so. Thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah, sure. And maybe Sean could help us with that a little bit from an overarching, hey, here are the things that need to be considered, and would that work for you, Sean?
Yeah, I'll run this by Ford. He said he had
Okay.
a couple ideas that he for sure can add, so we'll work
Super.
on that.
Super, thank you.
I did not have something related to security directly, but there is something called a column called column F for type of the agreements. So I did not put something explicitly over there, but there is something called type of agreements, which is column F.
Okay.
And this is Brian Hansbecker. I can also help on security as well as privacy issues.
Thank you,
great.
Brian.
That would be great. and the more I'm looking at this, the more it's going to be, assuming we, sort of clarify this more, we'll be able to understand within one domain, and maybe some of the columns need to move around a little bit so we get a clear understanding of what's what are we actually addressing here, or definitionally, so that within health, if I'm in let's say I'm in education, I can be looking at health saying, oh, here are the main providers, here are the main kinds of here's the main approaches, here's the data that's being shared, here's the technical approach. Translating it to education might take an interim step, but at least now I can see what's going on and how that applies to, matching within my particular domain. So I'm trying to go back to Noam's question about, so what do we do with this? So it's almost like, not a talent show, but like, here's what we're bringing to the table. Here's how it applies to our particular domain, and to be able, if this is clear enough and the definitions are clear, we'd be able to see the differences potentially. Well, if one is only a probabilistic match and the other is a deterministic match for whatever, are those things compatible? Is there a way that you would be able to combine, sort of look across systems, just as pulling out an example. One is particularly focused on, children, and the other one is focused on elderly. Is that kind of matching program going to be applicable or relevant to me? So I think there may be.
Well, the key in that, Daniel, to me is that Noam identified, they called it the variables for linkage. I think what that is the column L, the data elements used for matching, and how those vary from domain to domain. And that's where, I think that's at the heart of what we really want to get out of this whole matrix. That's the most important thing. Because that leads us to what data elements need to have some kind of standard representation across domains that doesn't exist.
Exactly. There is a sheet called variables for linkage.
Yeah, it's actually a separate sheet that
okay.
you're on now.
Yeah.
That's what I'm referring to.
I see it now.
There's a lot of
Yeah, there are multiple sheets. I apologize for that. This is the draft document, and yeah.
No need to apologize. There's a lot of work a lot of time that you're spending on this, which is terrific.
So what are the columns in that sheet? Are that the different domains?
Here it's like the first one is the domain, like what are the administrative variables. Right now I just populated with the administrative variables. Yeah. And some of the domains that came up during our discussion yesterday are like the project team's discussion are like administrative variables, biometrics, something can be clinical and behavioral, as well as biometrics, so as well as geometrics. So yeah, I still need to put that information together. And also the
Carmen Smiley.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I had a quick comment and perhaps suggestion, but I think we had mentioned standards before, and I think it would be interesting if we laid out which variables were included by standards from healthcare and standards from education, because underlying all of this, we're really talking about digital data, and so there may be different standards that we could map across domains that would help kind of map our path moving forward, and would also, in addition, argue that the approach is also very important. I understand sort of the idea of the minimum data set being foundational, and of course appreciate that. But there are many other challenges to overcome: lack of interoperability related to record matching.
Sure. Thank you, Carmen.
So let me sort of a process point here, because we are nearly at 1:30 here. So and it is apparently Labor Day weekend. Does it make sense? Maybe, I don't know how much time we've got. I don't know if we want to push this out for the week after next to sort of try to do some of this work, convene the subgroup, fill it in a bit more, do some more thinking. And then next week we can do two things. One is perhaps we could get, feature one of those, whether or not it's a TEFCA or it's an education. You look at one of the domains a little more in depth. And Marcia, I don't know if you're still on. I think Elliot had to jump off. But if we can find someone to speak about that, and then we can also go back to the second part of the agenda, which was to talk about other other project teams that might be looking at some of the standards, the name to fire standards or authentication or something like that. So Pradeep, it's really more on Pradeep, your shoulders with Brian and Paul. Do you think it's, or not Paul, but Dave?
Dave.
Do you want to work on it next week and present the following week, and then we fill in next week with the broader conversations?
Yeah,
and the education.
Yeah. If it works for Dave, yeah, and Brian, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So Marcelly, are you still on with us? I don't see you on here. All right. So, and I think Noam had to jump off. What would be is there a particular sense, or we just make an executive choice here relative to what sort of pop-up topics should we have? Should we try to get the education folks on? Should we try to do a TEFCA overview, or family first, child welfare, or human services? Anybody have an opinion?
No opinion. So, yeah.
You're going to need them all eventually, so.
Yeah.
So I get one of the questions would be, I think TEFCA is a really good one, but where are they currently at? In other words, if they publish the document and information is more available, that may be the time we want them to be on there.
Not understanding what you mean by where they're at. I mean, TEFCA's in version 3.
So it's final?
Oh, you're saying where the regulators are in terms of the current NPRM that's out, and have they finalized the current rule? Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't checked. I don't know.
This is Carmen from ONC. We are still in rulemaking.
So the timing on that, is that weeks, months away? Longer? any prognostication offered?
You could really just shake an 8 ball right now. We're
Okay.
hoping by the end of the year.
Okay.
That
So
may be
maybe
a little long to wait.
Yeah, maybe we need an interim. Maybe that's not the first one up. Maybe we can kind of look at education or social human services, particularly like something like Families First, which is, I think that might provide, or maybe the integrated care for kids kind of approach, that cross-domain thing. And I think that's coming out of ACF and CMS. So I don't know if they have a standard pitch that they can make to help us understand that, because I think that feels like that's going to be something that everyone is going to be dealing with more and more as we go forward, the cross-domain kind of thing. All right, so what I'll do is, and if anyone else wants to sort of weigh in on here, they're certainly welcome. I'll get back with Marcelly and Elliot, see if there's an education piece that we can bring to the table. If not, we'll look at some other options for next week, and then we'll talk about the other potential groups. And if there's an interim update, Pradeep and folks, that you want to provide, or a set of questions that you want to pose in front of the group, that would be great as well.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. Well, again, a stimulating conversation. Thanks for everyone for being on, and we'll talk to you along the way. And as I said, go to the group and make your comments and add your thoughts to it. And we'll talk to you all soon.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks, guys.
Bye,
Have
everyone.
a great
Great weekend, everybody.
Have a good holiday.
Bye.
Safe travels.
Bye-bye. Safe travels.
Bye.
Thank you.